Well, Compass family, it's a pleasure to welcome Jon Thompson with us today. Jon is the senior pastor at Sanctus Church, and he's the author of the book Convergence, which will be a major resource for us as we begin our next series. Maybe you've read the book. Anyways, it's so great to have you here, Jon. Thanks for joining us for a little bit.
Yeah, great to be with you. I want to say hello to you and the whole Compass family.
Awesome, thanks. Well, Convergence really is, it's your story as a follower of Jesus. It's your story as a church leader and for your church in this whole area of spiritual gifts. Could you give us just a little bit of background of kind of the genesis of the story of Convergence and what led you to chronicle it in your book?
As I was looking around in the late 90s and early 2000s as a youth pastor, I started going, we're not going to get out of this. Post-Christianity is real. Repaganization is real. We're not ready for this. And so what I started asking was, over 2,000 years, when there's been moments of like bleak winter or vanishing, how did Christians thrive in that moment? And what I discovered, didn't matter the culture, the background, even the denominational flair or style, is that three things took place. One, you had the entrance of spiritual disciplines. Number two, you had the entrance of spiritual gifts. And then third, you had a proper understanding of revival. And so I started going, oh my goodness, we need to start paying attention to this. The other thing that was the genesis of this, and I'll just throw this little grenade out and then you all can deal with it in your series. Everyone just peeked up in the pews or online going, what? Is I was trying to resolve what I do with Jesus not knowing when he was coming back after the resurrection. I was trying to understand why Jesus said in the book of John, I do nothing except what my Father tells me to do. I was trying to understand what did it mean that the Holy Spirit lightened on Jesus at his baptism, and then it says actually in Mark, pushed Jesus into the desert to face Satan. So I was like, okay, so we need real empowerment beyond HR or strategy or leadership stuff, which is fine, but isn't going to like win the day. And also, how do I resolve the tension in the Trinity? In other words, how did Jesus do all the stuff he did? Because the real thing I was struggling with was, I'm supposed to be a Christian and imitate Jesus, but Jesus is God and I'm not God. So I suppose I could never imitate him, and this is all just a big lie. Unless, of course, the starting place is different. So those three things tied together where we converged into this place called Convergence.
Awesome. And as you kind of look back and look ahead and continue to the journey in kind of this stream with the spiritual gifts, the spiritual disciplines and revival, what difference has it made like in the context of the life of your church?
Yeah, so I get really nervous with Christian words that are full of expectation that don't pan out. So I get nervous about revival and renewal, but I will say this, after we did this publicly for 10 weeks in 2011. We experienced 3 years of documented historic renewal in our church. It changed the nature of our church. It changed how we approach volunteerism. It changed how we approach hiring staff. It changed expectation, and it also changed where we focus on certain things. And we've never been the same.
So as Compass, just really begins this adventure over the next many weeks, working through some of the content of the book and delving into the spiritual gifts. Any cautions, encouragements, maybe even a challenge for us as we, begin this process?
Number one is this: if you come from a Christian background and you're conservative, and you are weary or concerned about the Holy Spirit stuff, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to put your hands open and say, Holy Spirit, lead me to all truth. Pain, history, and abuse of gifts does not mean they're untrue. And also, you need to actually put your theology down before Christ and say what's true. If you come from a more charismatic or Pentecostal background and you're really excited, I also need you to humble yourself and say, Lord, tell me where there have been excesses. Or some of you might be going, oh, I came to Compass because I left that craziness. Well, maybe the Lord's brought you here to see a balanced view of it. And third of all, a lot of you might be saying, I have no freaking clue what that guy's talking about. Like, here's what I'd like to say to you too. Be aware that the kingdom of darkness actually uses very similar style gifts. And so this process for you might help you decide actually where the empowerment you've experienced has come from and actually reveal if it's good or bad. As a guy who's been a pastor for 25 years, 40 countries later, teaching and hanging out all around the world, I'm just telling you, unless we start accessing a power that's beyond what we have right now, we are never going to win the day. And so theology, fear, pain, history, suspicion, or overexcitement can't actually be the designated sort of starting point for wrestling this down.
Well, we are so excited, and we just want to thank you again for joining us. And I know we'll stay in touch and keep you up to date with kind of how the journey goes. So thanks, Jon. Thanks so much for joining us and encouraging us today.
Yeah, God bless you guys.